The sun over Dry Creek, Texas wasn't just hot that summer. It was cruel. It was a brassy, unforgiving eye that had stared down the land for 11 straight months until the very dust seemed to weep. The sky was bleached white, the horizon a shimmering blur of heat, and the air tasted like pulverized regret. This was the backdrop to the tragedy slowly unfolding at the Ironwood Ranch run by Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was 58 years old, and she carried those years like the heavy leather of a well-worn saddle. Every line around her eyes was earned, a victory over a blizzard, a successful calving, or the quiet grief of losing her husband 20 years prior. She wasn't just a rancher. She was the Ironwood. Her skin was tough, her hair was a stubborn shade of silver braided tight beneath her wide-brimmed hat, and her voice, even when tired, carried the authority of someone who knew the land better than the land knew itself. But the land was turning against her. The creek that gave Dry Creek its optimistic name had been reduced to a snaking bed of cracked clay, hard as concrete. The cattle were listless, crowding the empty troughs, their ribs showing like skeletal maps. Eleanor had seen bad times, but this was the kind of drought that didn't just kill the grass, it killed hope. She stood by the main well, watching the pump rattle uselessly, bringing up nothing but a groan of dry air. The gauge was 0. The emergency tanks were dropping fast. She had maybe 4 days of water left, tops, if she rationed brutally. 4 days until she had to make the choice no rancher should ever have to make. Sell off the herd for pennies on the dollar or watch them die of thirst. Beside her stood Caleb Hayes, 33 years old, built lean and strong like a fence post, with hands that knew how to mend anything from a broken fence line to a horse's spirit. Caleb had been with Eleanor since he was 18. He wasn't just her foreman, he was the son she never had, the steady anchor in the storm. Caleb wore a perpetual shadow of worry on his face these days, but when he looked at Eleanor, his eyes were full of a fierce, protective fire. He knew what Ironwood meant to her. It wasn't just property, it was her heart, her legacy, her entire life poured into 80,000 acres of tough Texas soil. "It's done, Eleanor," Caleb said, his voice flat. He kicked a small pebble into the dry well casing. "We're pumping air." Eleanor didn't flinch. She just adjusted her hat. "Well, that saves on the electric bill, doesn't it, boy?" Caleb managed a weak smile, knowing she was trying to keep the mood light, a trick she used when the truth was too heavy to bear. "We gotta move the cattle closer to the highway," Caleb suggested, though they both knew it was futile. "If we can get a tanker in from Amarillo—" "A tanker costs more than the cattle are worth right now, Caleb," Eleanor cut in gently. "And we'd need 3 a day just to keep them from dropping. No, we have one option left." She looked toward the distant rise where the town of Dry Creek huddled, a collection of tired brick and wood buildings that had seen better days, days when the creek actually flowed. "The council," Caleb muttered, his jaw tightening. Dry Creek was sitting on a decent, if small, secondary aquifer, controlled entirely by the town council. It was meant for municipal use, but they had surplus rights they occasionally leased out during mild droughts. This drought, however, was biblical. Everyone was desperate. Eleanor had already put in the official request 3 weeks ago. She wanted to buy temporary water rights, enough to pump from the municipal line to the Ironwood Reservoir for 3 months. She offered triple the going rate. She offered land as collateral. The council had stalled. "I have the meeting at 3, Eleanor said. "They finally agreed to hear my proposal again. Jenkins says they've had to review the long-term feasibility of allocating resources to private entities." Caleb scoffed. "Jenkins means he's checking to see which of his buddies is willing to bid higher than you, Eleanor. And you know who he really means." They both knew. The Bar M Ranch, owned by the wealthy but absentee Miller family, had been trying to buy Ironwood for years. The Millers didn't need the water. They wanted Eleanor out. "I have to go, Caleb," Eleanor said, her resolve firming. I have to look them in the eye and make them understand that this is life and death, not a business deal. You shouldn't go alone, Caleb insisted. Eleanor put a hand on his arm, a brief, firm touch. I need you here, monitoring the tanks, and frankly, your presence just gives them another excuse to talk about things that aren't water. She didn't need to elaborate. The town of Dry Creek had a nasty habit of gossiping about the relationship between the legendary rancher and her loyal 33-year-old foreman. They said he was waiting for her to die so he could take the ranch. They said he was just hanging around for a cut of the insurance money. They said worse things too, implying a relationship that was purely professional and familial, but which the small-minded people of Dry Creek couldn't comprehend. Eleanor knew the ageism and the gossip fueled the council's reluctance. They saw a woman nearing 60, working a physically demanding job, and they saw weakness. They saw a ranch that needed a younger man's touch, preferably the touch of a man who belonged to their club. "Be careful, Eleanor," Caleb said, his worry etched deep. "I always am, boy." She climbed into her dusty pickup, the engine groaning in the heat, and drove toward the town, toward the small, air-conditioned tyranny of the Dry Creek Town Hall. The meeting room was oppressively formal, smelling faintly of stale coffee and old wood polish. The air conditioning was set so low that Eleanor almost shivered after the brutal heat outside, but the chill didn't touch the heat building inside her chest. 4 men sat behind a long oak table, looking down their noses at her. Mayor Jenkins, a slick man who wore starched shirts even in August. Mr. Peterson, who owned the feed store and was known for his stinginess. Harold Finch, the town lawyer, who looked perpetually bored. And Dale Thompson, the newest member, who had recently inherited his father's lumber yard and was trying too hard to seem important. "Mrs. Vance," Mayor Jenkins began, not bothering with pleasantries. He shuffled the papers Eleanor had submitted. "We appreciate your patience. We understand the severity of the situation at Ironwood." Eleanor leaned forward, planting her hands on the table. "Mayor, with all due respect, I don't think you do. I have 300 head of cattle. The tanks will be empty by Friday morning. If I don't secure water rights immediately, I lose everything. I lose the ranch, the herd, and the jobs of everyone who works for me." She pushed a new document across the table. "I am offering to pay 4 times the standard rate for the water rights. I will pay it up front in cash, and I have secured a bond that guarantees if any municipal services are affected, I will pay to have water trucked in for the entire town for a month. This is more than fair." Jenkins tapped the paper with a manicured finger. "The financial aspect is certainly compelling, Eleanor, very compelling, but the council has concerns, deep concerns about the long-term viability of the Ironwood Ranch under the current management structure." Eleanor felt a cold wave wash over her. It wasn't about money, it was about her age. "Viability," she challenged, her voice rising slightly. "I've managed Ironwood for 40 years. I survived the 1998 drought, the foot-and-mouth scare, and 2 recessions. I know this land better than anyone in this room." Mr. Peterson cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Well, Eleanor, those were different times. You're getting on, aren't you? This sort of infrastructure project, tying into the main line, running the pumps 24/7, it requires robust oversight. And frankly, the council has to consider what happens if, heaven forbid, something happens to you. The implication hung in the air. You are too old, too frail to handle this crisis." Harold Finch, the lawyer, chimed in smoothly. "It's about stability, Eleanor. We need to ensure that the water rights, once granted, will be managed responsibly for the next decade. Do you have a succession plan that ensures this ranch remains solvent?" Eleanor gritted her teeth. She had a succession plan, and his name was Caleb Hayes. But if she mentioned Caleb, they would just pivot to the gossip. "My succession plan is my business," she stated firmly. "My ability to manage this crisis is proven. I'm offering the town a huge financial benefit, and I'm asking for a basic necessity to save my livelihood." Mayor Jenkins leaned back, adopting a sympathetic yet patronizing expression. "We understand your passion, Eleanor, but you must also understand our obligation to the community. We have another proposal on the table, a group with a proven track record, substantial capital, and a long-term vision for the revitalization of the property." He didn't need to name the Millers. Everyone knew. "The Millers want to turn Ironwood into a resort, Mayor. They don't care about ranching. They don't care about the community. They just want a tax write-off," Eleanor pleaded, her voice laced with desperation now. "They have offered to purchase the water rights outright for the next 5 years, which is a considerable investment in the town's infrastructure fund," Jenkins said, his eyes avoiding hers. "And they guarantee that the management will be young, professional, and well-staffed." The word young was a deliberate, sharp knife twist. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't a negotiation, it was an execution. They were using the drought to force her hand, to make her fail, so the Millers could sweep in and buy the property for a song. "So you're telling me," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "that because I am 58 years old, you are going to let my cattle die, and you are going to hand my family's land over to outsiders?" Thompson, the young lumberyard owner, bristled. "It's not about age, Eleanor. It's about future assurance. We simply can't risk the town's water supply on a single aging operation." Eleanor stared at the 4 men, seeing not community leaders but predators. She saw the betrayal, cold and clear. She didn't argue further. She simply gathered her papers, stood up straight, and looked Jenkins dead in the eye. "You have made your choice, Mayor," she said, her voice steady despite the seismic shift happening inside her. "I hope you can sleep at night." She turned and walked out, leaving the cool, sterile room for the suffocating heat outside. The betrayal felt heavier than the sun beating down on her neck. When Eleanor got back to Ironwood, the sun was sinking, casting long, skeletal shadows of the mesquite trees across the dusty yard. The silence was the worst part, the silence of tired land and hopeless cattle. Caleb was waiting for her by the porch steps. He took one look at her face and didn't need to ask. "They said no," he stated, his voice tight with anger. Eleanor nodded, pulling off her hat and running a weary hand through her silver hair. "Worse than no, Caleb. They said I was too old. They said I wasn't a viable long-term investment. They're waiting for the Millers to swoop in." Caleb slammed his fist against the porch railing, making the wood shudder. "Those sons of snakes. They're letting this whole region dry up just to satisfy their own greed and prejudice. What are we going to do, Eleanor? We have to do something." Eleanor sat heavily on the top step, the fight draining out of her. "I don't know, Caleb. I truly don't know. I've reached the end of the line. I've called every contact, emptied every savings account. I have nothing left to offer." She looked out across the land her grandfather had broken, the land she had loved and worked her entire life. It was dying, and she was powerless to stop it. The thought was a physical pain, a crushing weight in her chest. Caleb sat beside her, his strong shoulder brushing hers. He didn't try to offer false hope. He just sat in the terrible silence with her. "There has to be another way to get that water, Eleanor," he insisted, his mind already racing, desperate for a solution. "The council controls the rights, but they don't own the whole aquifer. What about the land south of the highway? Old Man Hemlock's property? Doesn't he have a well that taps into that same vein?" Eleanor shook her head. "Hemlock sold his well rights to the town years ago for that infrastructure project. It's all tied into the municipal system now. They own the taps, Caleb. They own the taps, and they're holding us hostage. They sat until the stars began to prick the darkening sky, large and indifferent above their failing ranch." Eleanor finally stood, her joints protesting. "We start moving the herd tomorrow, Caleb. We'll take them down to the riverbed, just in case there's a sliver of moisture deep down. It's a long shot, but we have to try." "I'll get the trucks ready," Caleb said, standing with her. He watched her walk into the house, her gait heavier than he had ever seen it. The woman who had taught him everything he knew about grit, survival, and ranching was broken. And it wasn't the drought that broke her. It was the cruel, small-town prejudice that saw a woman of her age as disposable. Caleb walked away from the house, heading toward the large, meticulously maintained barn at the far end of the property. He wasn't thinking about the trucks or the cattle drive. He was thinking about the betrayal. He had failed her. He was young and strong, but he couldn't buy the water rights she needed. He didn't have the kind of capital that would override the council's deep-seated contempt. He stopped outside the largest stall. Inside, a low, rumbling sound greeted him. "Hey, boy," Caleb murmured, reaching over the gate to scratch the massive, muscled head of the bull that lumbered toward him. This was Maverick. Maverick wasn't just a bull, he was the future of the Ironwood Ranch. A massive charcoal black beast, he was a champion Charolais, the finest breeding stock in 3 states. He was magnificent, a perfect specimen of power and gentle temperament. His lineage traced back generations, and he was the spitting image of his namesake. Caleb's own grandfather, a legendary figure in Texas cattle country. When Caleb's grandfather died, he had left the bull, then just a calf, to Caleb, with the instruction, "Don't you ever sell this one, son. He's your insurance. He's your legacy." Maverick was worth a fortune. A few months ago, Caleb had turned down an offer of $150,000 for him from a high-end breeder in Oklahoma. That money, if invested in breeding rights and semen sales, would have secured Caleb's financial independence for years. It was his retirement fund, his security, his connection to the past. Now, as he stroked the bull's velvety nose, the $150,000 figure echoed in his mind. The water rights Eleanor needed were expensive, but not astronomical. She had offered triple the standard rate, which Caleb calculated to be around $60,000 for the 3-month lease and the necessary piping installation. The council had rejected her not because of the price, but because of the seller. What if the buyer wasn't Eleanor Vance? What if the buyer was an anonymous entity? What if the money was so clean, so immediate, and so significantly higher than the miller's offer that the council couldn't possibly refuse it? Caleb's heart began to pound against his ribs, a frantic, painful rhythm. He looked at Maverick. The bull was oblivious, chewing his cud, his massive body radiating warmth. This animal represented everything Caleb had worked for since he was a child. Selling him would be like selling his own right arm. It would be a betrayal of his grandfather's trust. It would mean starting over, with nothing but the clothes on his back and his wages from Ironwood. But the alternative was Eleanor losing everything. Watching Ironwood turn to dust, stolen by greedy men who didn't respect the years she had given the land. Caleb closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the cool wood of the gate. He saw Eleanor's defeated face in the fading light. He heard Mayor Jenkins's smug, ageist dismissal, his decision crystallized, hard and cold, in the pit of his stomach. His legacy was nothing compared to hers. His future was meaningless if the woman who had raised him, taught him, and trusted him was destroyed by small-town malice. He would sell Maverick, but he couldn't tell Eleanor. If she knew the price he paid, she would never accept the water. She would fight him tooth and nail to keep him from sacrificing his inheritance. This had to be fast, clean, and silent. Caleb pulled out his old flip phone. He wasn't much for new technology, and walked a good distance away from the barn, needing absolute privacy. He scrolled through his contacts until he found the number he hadn't touched in months. O'Malley. Okay. Sean O'Malley was the high-end breeder who had offered the astronomical price for Maverick. He was a man who knew quality and paid instantly, no questions asked. It was nearly 9 p.m., but O'Malley, being a dedicated rancher, was probably still up. Caleb took a deep, shaky breath, the dry air burning his lungs. He hit the call button. The phone rang twice before a gruff, Irish-accented voice answered. "O'Malley here." "Mr. O'Malley, this is Caleb Hayes from Ironwood Ranch, Dry Creek." A slight pause on the other end. "Ah, Mr. Hayes, the young man with the finest Charolais bull I've ever laid eyes on. I'd given up hope of hearing from you. Did you finally come to your senses about that $150,000 offer?" Caleb swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. The number sounded huge, impossible. It was exactly what he needed. "I'm calling because I'm accepting your offer," Caleb said, the words feeling heavy and final. $150,000, cash, wire transfer only, no breeding rights retained. He's all yours." O'Malley let out a low whistle of satisfaction. "Well now, that's the best news I've had all year. What's the catch, son? You sound like you're calling me from a funeral." "No catch," Caleb insisted, keeping his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But I need this done tomorrow. Wire transfer needs to be completed by noon. And I need him picked up by the end of the day. I'll handle the paperwork. You handle the money." "Tomorrow? That's mighty sudden, Mr. Hayes. But for Maverick, I'll make it happen. I'll dispatch a trailer immediately. Send me the bank details now and I'll have my accountant on it first thing in the morning." "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley." "No, thank you, son. You just sold yourself a fortune." Caleb hung up the phone. The fortune felt like ash in his mouth. He had traded his heritage for a chance at a secret rescue. He walked back to the house, the plan already forming in his mind. He couldn't just walk into the town hall with a suitcase full of cash. That would raise too many questions, especially about where a foreman got that kind of money. He needed an intermediary. He needed the sale to be completely anonymous. A clean, irresistible offer made to the council that bypassed Eleanor entirely. He thought of the one person in Dry Creek who was straight as an arrow, discreet, and owed Eleanor a favor. Martha Jean, the town clerk. She handled all the administrative paperwork for the town council, but she had a soft spot for Eleanor, who had helped Martha Jean's family years ago when her husband was sick. Martha Jean hated Mayor Jenkins and his clique. Caleb found a dusty notepad and a pen. He needed to write a proposal that was so attractive, so immediate, and so anonymous that the council couldn't attribute it to Eleanor and couldn't afford to waste time arguing about the source. He wrote slowly, carefully crafting the language, to the Dry Creek Town Council. An anonymous entity is prepared to purchase the temporary water rights for the Ironwood Ranch property immediately. This purchase is contingent on the following terms. 1. Price, $90,000 USD, paid in full via cashier's check upon agreement. He needed to make sure the price was significantly higher than what Eleanor offered, and higher than the Millers would offer for a lease, while still leaving him enough cash for the necessary piping and installation. 2. Duration, 6 months minimum, with an option to extend. 3. Condition, the funds are only released upon the immediate and unconditional approval of the water rights transfer to the Ironwood Ranch property. 4. Identity. The identity of the purchasing party must remain confidential and is not subject to public disclosure or council inquiry. He signed it simply, a concerned citizen. The remaining $60,000 would cover the piping, the pump installation, and the 6-month lease extension if needed. It was enough, just barely. He folded the paper, feeling a strange mix of terror and grim satisfaction. The hard part wasn't selling the bull. The hard part was the secrecy. He had to execute this entire rescue mission without Eleanor ever knowing that her cattle were drinking the blood money of his sacrifice. He had to move fast. He had to get the money, deliver the proposal through Martha Jean, and secure the water rights before Eleanor started her desperate, doomed cattle drive tomorrow morning. Caleb didn't sleep. He spent the night preparing the livestock trailer for O'Malley's crew, polishing the paperwork, and then, most painfully, sitting with Maverick. He whispered promises to the bull, assuring him that he was going to a good, green place, a place with endless water and soft grass. At 7 a.m., Caleb was in his truck, driving toward the bank in the next county over. He wore his best denim shirt, trying to look respectable enough not to attract suspicion when a six-figure wire transfer hit his personal account. He found Martha Jean sipping coffee at the local diner just before she started her shift at town hall. Martha Jean was a large woman with a kind face and eyes that missed nothing. She looked tired, but she smiled genuinely when she saw Caleb. "Morning, Caleb. How's Eleanor holding up? I heard about that council meeting yesterday. Jenkins is a fool." Caleb slid into the booth across from her. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Martha Jean, I need your help. A huge favor. It's about the water rights." He handed her the folded note. Martha Jean frowned, unfolding the paper. As she read the terms, $90,000, anonymous, immediate, her eyes widened. "Caleb, where did this come from?" she whispered, looking around the diner. "It came from a source who cares about Ironwood and who hates watching that council play games." Caleb answered firmly. "I need you to present this to Jenkins this morning, before the coffee gets cold. I need you to tell him that the cashier's check is ready right now, and if they don't accept this, the offer is withdrawn, and the money goes to a rival town's infrastructure fund." Martha Jean looked skeptically at the note, then back at Caleb, her gaze sharp. $90,000, Caleb, that's a lot of money. You are awfully close to this concerned citizen." "It doesn't matter who the citizen is, Martha Jean," Caleb stressed, leaning in close. "What matters is that this is the only thing that will save Eleanor and Ironwood. Jenkins and his crew won't turn down that kind of cash, especially if they think they can pocket it without any public scrutiny. It overrides their prejudice. It saves the ranch." Martha Jean hesitated, biting her lip. She knew the risk. If Jenkins found out she was acting as a go-between, she could lose her job. But then she remembered Eleanor, how she had rallied the town years ago to help Martha Jean's sick child. She remembered the sheer, cruel injustice of yesterday's council meeting. "All right, Caleb," she finally agreed, folding the note carefully and tucking it into her purse. "I'll tell Jenkins that an anonymous investor, a very wealthy one, is making a one-time, non-negotiable offer. He won't be able to resist the money." "Thank you, Martha Jean. Truly. This means everything." Caleb left the diner, the weight of the plan temporarily lifting. He still had to wait for the wire transfer, and he still had to oversee the silent departure of Maverick. He arrived at the bank just as it opened. The wire transfer from Oklahoma hit his account precisely at 11:45 a.m., $150,000. It felt surreal. He immediately went to the teller and requested a cashier's check made out to the Dry Creek Municipal Infrastructure Fund for $90,000. He tucked the check into a clean envelope. He drove back toward Ironwood, but stopped a mile short of the ranch. He called Martha Jean. "Any word?" he asked, his heart hammering. "Just got out of the emergency session, Caleb." Martha Jean's voice was tight with suppressed excitement. "Jenkins called an immediate vote. They tried to argue about the anonymity, but $90,000 cash right now was too much. They voted unanimously. The water rights transfer to the Ironwood property is approved, effective immediately." Caleb let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The relief was staggering, almost nauseating. "Thank you, Martha Jean. I owe you everything. Where are you now?" "I'm heading back to the office. I told Jenkins I'd handle the logistics. He's already bragging about the anonymous investment to the feed store owner." "Good. I'm dropping off the check at the back entrance of the town hall in 5 minutes. You meet me there." And Martha Jean, remember the most important part. Eleanor cannot under any circumstances know who bought these rights. My lips are sealed, Cowboy, she promised. I saw her face yesterday. This is the right thing to do. 5 minutes later, Caleb handed the envelope containing the $90,000 check to Martha Jean. The transaction was over. Ironwood was safe. But as he drove away, he saw a large cattle trailer, emblazoned with the logo of O'Malley Ranch, turning down the dusty lane that led to Ironwood. He was too late. Eleanor was home, and she was about to see the price of her salvation drive up her driveway. Caleb slammed the steering wheel. He had been so focused on the council, he hadn't accounted for the speed of O'Malley's crew. He had to get back there now, before Eleanor saw Maverick leave, before she put the pieces together, and before his entire sacrifice was ruined. He pushed the old truck past the limit, kicking up a massive cloud of red dust toward the Ironwood Ranch. He prayed he wasn't too late to maintain the secret that had cost him his own future. Eleanor was standing by the corral, watching the last of the horses be loaded onto the smaller trailer for the doomed cattle drive, when the massive, unfamiliar cattle hauler pulled in. It was a professional rig, clean and well-maintained, not the usual local transport. A man with a thick Irish accent and a wide grin stepped out of the truck. "Mrs. Vance? Sean O'Malley's crew, ma'am. Here for the pickup." Eleanor frowned, confused. "Pickup? I haven't sold anything, sir. You must have the wrong address." "Ironwood Ranch, Dry Creek, Texas?" the man confirmed, checking his clipboard. "We're here for the champion bull, Maverick. Mr. Hayes sold him this morning." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Caleb sold Maverick. She stumbled back a step, her hand flying to her chest. Maverick, the bull that was Caleb's legacy, his inheritance, his future. The one thing his grandfather had told him never to sell. "That's impossible," she choked out. "He would never—" Just then, Caleb's old pickup roared into the yard, skidding to a halt in a cloud of dust. Caleb jumped out, his face pale and frantic. He saw Eleanor talking to the O'Malley crew, and he knew instantly he had failed. He rushed toward her. "Eleanor, wait, I can explain." Eleanor didn't look at him. She looked at the O'Malley crew, who were already lowering the ramp to the main barn. "He sold Maverick," she whispered, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. "Why, Caleb? Why would you sell him?" Caleb reached for her arm, but she pulled away. He knew he couldn't tell her the truth yet. Not with these men standing here. He had to lie, and the lie tasted like iron. I had to, Eleanor. I had some debts. Things I hadn't told you about. Old debts I needed to clear. O'Malley's offer was too good to pass up. It was my only chance to get straight. The lie was flimsy, but it was the only shield he had. Eleanor stared at him, and in her eyes, Caleb saw the betrayal magnified tenfold. It wasn't just the sale of the bull, it was the secrecy, the sudden cold admission of hidden debt, and the realization that the one person she trusted implicitly had acted entirely on his own, putting his own financial security above their partnership. "Debts," Eleanor's voice was dangerously low. "You let me sit on that porch last night, planning how to save this ranch, when you had $150,000 waiting for you? You sold the one thing that mattered to your grandfather for a debt?" She shook her head, the disappointment radiating off her like heat from the pavement. "I thought you were better than that, Caleb. I thought you cared about Ironwood more than that." The O'Malley crew started leading Maverick out of the barn. The bull looked magnificent, oblivious to the drama, walking with his heavy, confident stride toward the ramp. Caleb watched him go, the pain of the sacrifice mixed with the agony of Eleanor's misunderstanding. "Eleanor, please, you have to understand," he pleaded. "This debt, it was serious. It was my only choice." "Your choice," she repeated, her voice brittle. "And you made it alone. You didn't trust me enough to tell me. You didn't trust this ranch enough to wait." She turned away from him, watching Maverick disappear into the massive trailer. The loss was profound, echoing the betrayal she had felt from the town council just hours before. She was being abandoned on all fronts. The O'Malley crew chief shook Caleb's hand briskly. "We'll get him loaded up, Mr. Hayes. Good luck to you." Caleb barely registered the handshake. His eyes were fixed on Eleanor, whose back was still turned to him. The trailer pulled out, taking Caleb's past and his future down the dusty road. He walked over to Eleanor, placing a tentative hand on her shoulder. "Eleanor, look at me. I promise you, I will make this right. I will work for you for free until this debt is paid off. Ironwood is still my home." Eleanor finally turned, her eyes red but dry. She was too angry to cry. "Ironwood is dying, Caleb, and you just sold the one thing that could have saved your own future," she said, her voice hollow. Ironwood is dying, Caleb, and you just sold the one thing that could have saved your own future," she said, her voice hollow. "I don't know who you are anymore." She turned her back completely, walking toward the house without another word. It was a silence heavier than any accusation. It was the sound of a trust snapping cleanly in two. Caleb stood alone in the dust, the scent of diesel fumes from the departing truck stinging his nose. He had saved Ironwood, but in doing so he had destroyed his relationship with the one person who mattered most. The shame was a physical weight, pressing him into the parched earth. He wanted to scream the truth. "I did it for you, Eleanor. I did it because those old fools wouldn't let an old woman save her own ranch." But he couldn't. If he told her, the entire sacrifice would be undone. She would try to send the money back. Or worse, she would feel indebted to him for the rest of her life, knowing he had thrown away his grandfather's legacy for her. He had to let her hate him. He had to carry the lie until the ranch was stable again. He watched the taillights of the O'Malley truck disappear, taking with it the future he had planned. He had $60,000 left in his account, money that felt dirty and wrong, but which he needed to hold on to for the inevitable costs of the water hookup. He walked to the main barn, the place where Maverick had always stood. The stall was empty, smelling only of hay and dust now. Caleb leaned his head against the wooden beam, letting out a long, shuddering breath. He felt utterly hollowed out. He found Eleanor in the kitchen, packing a small bag. She was moving with a rigid, unnatural efficiency. "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice rough. "I'm going to stay in the bunkhouse tonight," she said, not meeting his eyes as she folded a spare shirt. "I need some space, Caleb, and frankly, I need to figure out what happens next. The cattle drive starts at dawn. We're still going to the riverbed." "Wait," Caleb insisted, stepping forward. "We don't need to drive the cattle, Eleanor." She stopped folding, finally lifting her eyes to him. They were cold, distant, and utterly devoid of the warmth he had relied on for 15 years. "Don't tell me what we need, Caleb. You've made your own choices, and now I'll make mine. I'm not standing by while my herd starves just because you suddenly decided to clear your conscience and your debt." "No, listen to me," Caleb said, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. He had to pivot to introduce the miracle without claiming ownership. Before I sold Maverick, I put out every feeler I had. I talked to every contractor, every old friend. I was trying to find an alternative well, anything. I think one of those calls paid off." She stared at him, skeptical, her arms crossed tight over her chest. "A miracle, Caleb, after the council just slapped me down?" The phone rang, shattering the tension. It was the landline sitting on the counter. Eleanor snatched it up. "Ironwood Ranch," Eleanor Vance speaking. Caleb watched her face, his heart pounding. This was it. Martha Jean was delivering the news. Eleanor's expression shifted from guarded anger to utter bewilderment. A municipal work crew, now? For what? She paused, listening intently, her eyes wide. "Water rights? Approved? Who? Who purchased them?" She looked frantically at Caleb, then back at the phone. A private, anonymous investor. $90,000? Mayor Jenkins approved it? She dropped the phone back into the cradle as if it had burned her. She stood stock still for a moment, processing the impossible information. "Caleb," she whispered, turning to him slowly. "That was Martha Jean. She said the town council just approved the transfer of water rights to Ironwood. A substantial anonymous offer came in right after I left the meeting yesterday. They sent a crew to start the hookup immediately. The weight of the impending disaster lifted instantly, replaced by a dizzying, confusing rush of reprieve. Ironwood was saved. The cattle were saved. But the confusion was immense. She had failed. The town had rejected her, yet salvation had arrived, paid for by an unknown hand, at a price that was astronomical. "I told you I put out feelers," Caleb managed, trying to sound relieved, not guilty. "Someone heard about our situation. Someone must have taken pity on us, Eleanor." "Pity? $90,000 isn't pity, Caleb. It's an investment. Who would invest that kind of money anonymously, just hours after I was humiliated?" Her sharp rancher's mind immediately focused on the timing. "Maybe it was someone who hated the council as much as we do," Caleb suggested, walking toward the door. "Look, it doesn't matter who paid. What matters is that the water is coming. We need to stop the drive and get the reservoir prepped. I need to meet that crew and show them where the main line connects." He moved quickly, using the sudden, intense logistical demands as a shield. He needed to be the foreman, the man in charge of the installation, not the man who paid for it. Eleanor watched him go, a conflict raging in her eyes. On one hand, the ranch was saved. A wave of profound, debilitating relief washed over her, making her legs weak. On the other hand, the timing was too perfect, and Caleb's sudden, desperate sale of Maverick, just hours before the anonymous offer arrived, was a coincidence too massive to ignore. She walked out onto the porch just as the municipal crew, two beat-up trucks carrying pipe and heavy equipment, pulled up behind Caleb's truck. The foreman, a grizzled man named Roy who had worked for the town for decades, looked utterly flustered. "Mrs. Vance," Roy called out, pulling off his cap. "We got the emergency order. This is the fastest hookup the town's ever done. We're running a 6-inch line straight from the municipal pump station to your main reservoir. We'll have water flowing by sundown." Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Roy, I appreciate it. But who paid for this? I was just told yesterday the council wouldn't even consider my offer." Roy shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "Beats me, ma'am. All I know is a cashier's check for $90,000 hit the infrastructure fund this morning, clean as a whistle. Jenkins signed the work order so fast he nearly tore the paper, said it was a private civic investment. Didn't even ask who the investor was, just that the Ironwood property was to get priority hookup." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Jenkins is strutting around like he won the lottery. He's already planning to spend the money on new paving for his street, I bet." Eleanor nodded, thanking Roy. The information confirmed Caleb's story about the anonymous donor, but it didn't ease the suspicion in her gut. She watched Caleb direct the crew, moving with a manic energy she hadn't seen since the crisis began. He was too eager, too involved in the details of the piping. She walked up to him while he was arguing with Roy about the gauge of the pressure valve. "Caleb, stop for a minute," she commanded. He turned, wiping sweat from his brow, his eyes avoiding hers. "Eleanor, we don't have time. We need to get this pipe laid before the sun cooks the asphalt off the road." "Did you know about this anonymous investor?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. Caleb hesitated just a fraction too long. "No, Eleanor. How could I? I told you I was trying everything. Maybe one of the people I called got in touch with a friend or a relative. Maybe someone who knows the Millers are trying to squeeze us out." He forced himself to look her in the eye, trying to project sincerity. "I swear, Eleanor, I don't know who paid for it, but thank God they did. We're saved." He was telling a half-truth, but the lie about Maverick was still hanging between them, thick and poisonous. "You sold Maverick for a debt this morning," she stated flatly. And then, 3 hours later, a check for $90,000 arrives to save Ironwood. "You expect me to believe those two things are unrelated?" Caleb felt the heat rise in his cheeks, but he held his ground. He had to make the lie convincing, even if it meant confirming her worst fears about his character. "They are unrelated, Eleanor," he insisted, dropping his voice so the crew couldn't hear. "The money from Maverick is going straight to my creditors. It's not enough to pay for this whole project. Look at the numbers. $150,000 against $90,000 for the rights, plus the installation costs. It's complicated, Eleanor. I was in a bad spot. I panicked. I sold the bull because I was desperate to get clear, not because I was planning to buy water rights." He forced a look of guilt and remorse onto his face. "I know it looks bad. I know you think I sold my grandfather's legacy for selfish reasons. And maybe I did. But this water, this is a miracle we didn't earn, but we need to take it." Eleanor searched his eyes, looking for any flicker of the loyal, honest boy she knew. But all she saw was a man cornered, covering a secret. The math Caleb presented was plausible. $150,000 was a lot, but $90,000 was a huge chunk of it, and Caleb claimed he had debts. It was possible he used the remainder to pay off what he owed, and the anonymous investor was simply a separate lucky break. The pain of the lie was excruciating for Caleb, but it seemed to work. Eleanor looked defeated, not convinced, but too weary to fight the miracle. "Fine," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "You handle the crew, get the water flowing. Then we talk about your future here, Caleb." It was the closest she came to firing him. He knew he was on thin ice, maybe already sunk. But the ranch was alive. "Yes, Eleanor," he said simply, turning back to the pipes. The next few hours were a blur of intense, back-breaking labor under the brutal Texas sun. Caleb worked harder than anyone, hauling pipe, digging trenches, and supervising the connection points. He didn't stop for water, driven by the need to see the job done, and by the desperate hope that his physical exhaustion might silence the emotional turmoil. Eleanor stayed nearby, supervising, but she kept her distance from Caleb. She spent time with the cattle, giving them the last dribbles of precious water and murmuring reassurances. She still looked heartbroken, but now, mixed with the grief, was a fragile, guarded hope. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and red, the municipal crew finished the final connection at the main reservoir. Roy, the foreman, gave Caleb a thumbs up. "All right, Hayes, we're ready to open the valve. Get ready for some pressure." Caleb nodded, his heart hammering in anticipation. He walked over to the large brass wheel, his hands shaking slightly. This was the moment, the culmination of his sacrifice. He turned the wheel slowly. For a second, nothing happened. Then a shudder ran through the ground beneath their feet, followed by a low, powerful whoosh as the pressurized water surged through the newly laid pipe. Caleb ran toward the reservoir, reaching the edge just as the first torrent of fresh, cold water exploded into the dry basin. It wasn't a trickle. It was a violent, powerful stream, hitting the cracked clay bottom with a sound that was pure music, the sound of life returning. Eleanor arrived beside him, her face streaked with dust and tears. She didn't look at Caleb. She looked only at the water. She watched the muddy pool deepen, spread, and begin to reflect the dying light of the sky. The cattle, sensing the change, started to stir, moving closer to the reservoir fence, lowing softly. Eleanor fell to her knees at the edge of the basin, placing one hand on the cool, damp earth where the water was pooling. She closed her eyes, letting the profound relief wash over her. The ironwood was breathing again. When she finally stood, she looked at Caleb, and for the first time since morning, the coldness in her eyes thawed slightly, replaced by gratitude for the result, if not the method. "It's a miracle," she whispered. "A true miracle." "No, Eleanor," Caleb said, his voice husky. "It's just water, but it's enough." Roy and his crew packed up, thanking Caleb for the smooth operation. As they drove away, leaving Ironwood bathed in the twilight, Eleanor and Caleb were alone again, surrounded by the sound of rushing water. "We need to turn off the pump in an hour. Let the reservoir fill slowly overnight," Eleanor said, her rancher instinct kicking in. "Then we can run the lines to the troughs first thing in the morning." "I'll handle it," Caleb replied. They walked toward the house in silence. The physical danger was over, but the emotional chasm between them was wider than ever. As they reached the porch, Eleanor stopped. "I need to know, Caleb. I need to know everything about this debt. I'm not saying you have to leave, but I can't run a ranch with a man who has secrets that big. If you are in trouble, I need to know how deep it goes." Caleb knew this moment was inevitable. He had to solidify the lie. He had to convince her that his actions were driven by personal weakness, not selfless devotion. "It wasn't a ranch debt, Eleanor," he began, staring at the ground. "It was, from years ago, a bad business venture when I was younger, before I came back to Ironwood full-time. I borrowed money from the wrong kind of people. They were calling in the markers and they were getting serious. O'Malley's offer was my only way out." He looked up, meeting her gaze, forcing the lie to sound like painful truth. "I should have told you. I should have trusted you. But I was ashamed. I thought if I sold Maverick and paid them off, you'd never have to know I almost dragged your ranch into my mess." Eleanor sighed, the disappointment heavy in the air. "Caleb, I would have helped you. We would have figured it out together. You are family. You've been running this place with me for 15 years. You threw away your inheritance because you were afraid to talk to me." "I know," Caleb murmured, hanging his head. "I made a terrible mistake. I sold the bull and then, by some sheer luck, the anonymous money came in. It made me look like a damn fool, or worse, a greedy opportunist." "It made you look like you put your own survival ahead of ours," Eleanor corrected him, her voice firm. "I don't blame you for wanting to survive, Caleb, but I blame you for the secrecy. I blame you for not trusting me." She stepped closer, her expression softening into a painful mixture of love and hurt. "You are still my foreman, Caleb, for now, but you are not my partner. Not until you earn back my trust. You'll take the bunkhouse tonight, and we'll work out the terms of your repayment. I need to know, line by line, where that money went." "Understood, Eleanor," Caleb replied, accepting the punishment. He deserved it. He had chosen the secret over their bond. He spent the next few hours meticulously documenting the fictional repayment of his fictional debts, calculating how much of the $150,000 would be left. He decided to keep $10,000 for immediate, unexpected ranch costs, claiming the other $50,000 was used for exorbitant interest and fees from his fictional creditors. He knew he was weaving a web of lies he would have to live inside for years, but Ironwood was safe. Datum. The next morning the air was still dry, but the mood at Ironwood was entirely different. The cattle drank deep and slow from the troughs, their listless bodies transforming into creatures of contented bovine bulk. The sight of them drinking, the sound of the pump working steadily, was the best medicine Eleanor could have asked for. She was exhausted, but revitalized. The burden of immediate failure had been lifted. Eleanor called a small meeting with the remaining ranch hands. "Ironwood is back in business," she announced, her voice strong again. "We have secured water rights for the next 6 months, thanks to a generous, anonymous donor. The drought isn't over, so we will continue to ration, but the crisis is averted. We get back to work today." The hands cheered, genuine relief visible on their faces. Caleb stood slightly apart, listening. He was ready to throw himself into the work, hoping that competence and effort could somehow bridge the gap between him and Eleanor. But the town of Dry Creek wasn't ready to let the drama die. Mid-morning, while Caleb was out checking the fence line, a beat-up sedan pulled into the Ironwood driveway. It was Mayor Jenkins, wearing a smug, triumphant grin, accompanied by Mr. Peterson, the feed store owner. Eleanor met them on the porch, her expression reserved. "Mayor Jenkins," she greeted him coolly, "to what do I owe this pleasure?" Jenkins spread his hands wide. "Just checking on our prized client, Eleanor, making sure that $90,000 is being put to good use. We want to ensure the infrastructure fund investment is sound." "The water is flowing, Mayor," Eleanor confirmed. "Thank you for finally approving the transfer." "Well, we were happy to, once the right offer came along," Jenkins said, his voice dripping with condescension. He motioned to Peterson, who stepped forward holding a stack of papers. "We actually came out here to discuss the next step, Eleanor," Peterson said, adjusting his glasses. "Now that the immediate crisis is over, we need to talk about the long-term future of Ironwood." Eleanor frowned. "I believe the 6-month lease covers the immediate future, gentlemen." "Ah, but this is the crucial part," Jenkins chimed in, stepping closer. "The anonymous investor did us a huge favor, yes. But that money, Eleanor, only bought the lease. It didn't buy stability. And frankly, now that Ironwood is solvent again, the Millers are very interested in ensuring that this ranch doesn't fall back into disrepair if the drought continues." Eleanor felt a fresh wave of cold anger. "Are you telling me you're trying to sell my land out from under me even after I secured the water?" No, not sell," Jenkins corrected, holding up a hand. "We are talking about a partnership. The Millers have made a substantial new offer to the town. They want to buy a 51% stake in the Ironwood Ranch operation, guaranteeing young professional management and injecting capital to modernize your aging equipment. Think of it, Eleanor. Guaranteed retirement, financial security, and the ranch continues, just under new, robust oversight." He was back to the ageism. Only this time, he was using the Millers' deep pockets and the town's water as leverage. They had tried to starve her out. Now they were trying to buy her out, using the very water she desperately needed as the bargaining chip. "The council feels strongly that, given your recent difficulties and your age, a transition of control is in the best interest of the community," Peterson added, his eyes hard. Eleanor felt a dizzying pressure behind her eyes. The relief of the water was already being poisoned by the council's endless greed. "You have no right to interfere with the ownership of Ironwood, Mayor," Eleanor stated, her voice shaking slightly with suppressed fury. "I own this land outright. It is not collateral for the water rights." "Ah, but the water rights are leased through the town," Jenkins countered smoothly. "And the council has the power to review the long-term management of any entity utilizing municipal resources under a crisis allocation. If we deem the management unstable, we can rescind the lease with 30 days' notice, citing misuse of community assets." It was blackmail, pure and simple. "You want me to hand over my life's work to the Millers, or you'll turn off the water in 30 days, is that it?" Eleanor challenged him. Jenkins smiled, a terrible, oily smile. "We prefer to call it facilitating a smooth succession in partnership with our most valued stakeholders. The Millers have guaranteed that if they take over, the town gets an immediate $500,000 bonus for the infrastructure fund." Eleanor felt sick. They were selling her out for $500,000, turning her desperate rescue into a corporate takeover. "I won't do it," Eleanor said, her voice now steel. "I will fight you, Jenkins. I will take this to the county court. I will expose your corruption." Jenkins just chuckled. "You can try, Eleanor. But do you really think a county judge is going to side with an aging rancher against the entire town council and $500,000 in community funding? You have 30 days to consider the Millers' generous offer." They turned and walked back to the sedan, leaving Eleanor standing alone on the porch, the taste of ashes back in her mouth. The water was flowing, but the fight was far from over. It had just escalated into a war for ownership. Party. When Caleb returned, Eleanor was sitting on the porch swing, staring blankly toward the setting sun, a new layer of defeated tension etched around her eyes. "What happened?" Caleb asked immediately, noticing the dark cloud that had replaced the morning's cautious hope. Eleanor recounted the visit, her voice low and tight with rage. "They want the ranch, Caleb. They're using the water as a weapon. 30 days or they cut the tap. They want me to sell 51% to the millers." Squirmed. Caleb's jaw clenched. He felt a surge of cold, protective fury. He had sacrificed everything to save Ironwood from the drought, only for the council to immediately pivot to outright theft. "We can't let them do that," Caleb growled. "The millers will ruin this place. They'll run it into the ground." "I know," Eleanor sighed, rubbing her temples. "But what choice do I have? A lawsuit will take months, maybe years. 30 days from now, the water is gone. The cattle die. I'd lose the ranch anyway." Caleb paced the porch, his mind racing. The miller's offer was $500,000 to the town. That meant the millers were willing to pay a fortune to take over Ironwood. The council wasn't just being greedy, they were trying to force a sale to enrich themselves and their cronies. "We need leverage, Eleanor," Caleb said, stopping in front of her. "We need something that proves the council is acting out of malice and not community interest. Something that exposes Jenkins." "Jenkins covered his tracks perfectly," Eleanor refuted. "He'll claim the miller's offer is better for the long-term stability of the town's infrastructure fund." "It's a clean paper trail, Caleb, unlike my own situation." The reference to his debts hung between them. "We need proof that the council is prejudiced against you specifically," Caleb insisted. "They already showed that," Eleanor pointed out bitterly. "They called me too old and too frail. That was their reason for rejecting my first offer." "But we don't have it recorded," Caleb said, his eyes lighting up with an idea. "We need them to say it on the record, or we need to prove they are rejecting a superior offer just to force you out." He paused, thinking hard about the anonymous $90,000 payment. "Wait a minute," Caleb said, turning to look at the paperwork Eleanor had on the table. "Did you see the official documentation for the water rights transfer?" Eleanor pointed to a thin folder. "Martha Jean sent it over. It's just the standard municipal lease agreement, citing the anonymous civic investment. The purchase price is listed as $90,000. Caleb snatched the folder and flipped through the documents until he found the payment receipt. "Here it is," he muttered. $90,000, cashier's check, paid to the Dry Creek Municipal Infrastructure Fund. What about it?" Eleanor asked. "The millers offered $500,000 for a controlling stake in the ranch, which benefits the town with a lump sum payment," Caleb explained. "But they didn't offer anything for the water lease itself. They expected to get the rights cheap once you failed." He tapped the receipt. "This $90,000 was a direct, immediate, non-contingent investment in the town's fund, just for the water rights lease. It's pure profit for the town right now. The miller's $500,000 is contingent on them actually acquiring Ironwood." So, Caleb said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "We beat them to the punch. We need to find another anonymous investor, someone who will pay even more than the $500,000 the millers are dangling, but who will pay it to the town immediately, not contingent on the sale of Ironwood. If the town council turns down an even higher, immediate offer, then we have proof they are acting against the financial interest of the community, purely to benefit the millers." Eleanor shook her head. "Caleb, who has that kind of money, and who would be crazy enough to donate it to Dry Creek just to spite Jenkins?" Caleb looked away, his expression suddenly guarded again. "I have one more connection, Eleanor. A very wealthy contact. I'm going to make one more call. I'm going to see if I can get them to put up the money for a second, much larger anonymous offer. He was talking about the remaining money from the sale of Maverick. He had $60,000 left. He couldn't generate $500,000. He couldn't even generate $100,000 more. Caleb, don't tell me this is about those debts again, Eleanor warned. It's not, Caleb lied smoothly. This is about calling in a favor from someone who owes me. I can't promise anything, but I have to try. We need to buy ourselves time. He walked away quickly before Eleanor could ask more questions. He went straight to the bunkhouse, locking the door behind him. He didn't have a wealthy contact. He didn't have another source of funds. He had $60,000 left, and that was nowhere near enough to counter the miller's $500,000 incentive. He sat on the bed, running a weary hand through his hair. He needed a plan that didn't involve more money he didn't have. He needed leverage. He needed the truth. He thought back to the council meeting. Eleanor said they called her too old, too frail. He knew Mayor Jenkins was a meticulous man, always following procedure, even when being corrupt. The town council has the power to review the long-term management of any entity utilizing municipal resources under a crisis allocation. That was the loophole Jenkins was using. The decision to grant the water rights was made under an emergency allocation, which gave the council leverage to review management. Caleb picked up his flip phone and called Martha Jean. Martha Jean, it's Caleb. I need another favor, a big one. Caleb, what is it? Jenkins is unbearable. He's already measuring his new mahogany desk. Jenkins and Peterson were out here today. They're threatening to rescind the water rights in 30 days unless Eleanor sells the ranch to the Millers, Caleb explained quickly. They're citing the council's right to review management under the crisis allocation. Oh, those snakes, I knew it wasn't over. Martha Jean, I need to know exactly how that council meeting went yesterday. When they were discussing Eleanor's initial offer, did they take formal minutes? Did they record the session? Yes, standard procedure. We record everything, even the executive sessions. It's all stored in the basement archive, locked up tight. Caleb's heart began to hammer again. I need those recordings, Martha Jean. I need the part where they discuss Eleanor's age and the viability of the current management structure. Caleb, that's confidential council property. If I give you those, I'll lose my job, maybe face jail time. I know the risk, Martha Jean, but this is the only way to save Ironwood. If we can prove they rejected Eleanor based solely on age prejudice, using the Miller's offer as cover, we can expose them. We can file an emergency injunction and get a judge to force them to honor the lease, regardless of the Millers. He appealed to her conscience. You heard what they were saying about Eleanor. They are betraying this community for profit. You have the power to stop them, Martha Jean. She was silent for a long moment on the other end of the line. They keep the archive key in the safe in Jenkins' office, she finally conceded, her voice barely a whisper. I know the combination. He uses his wife's birthday. I'll be closing up the office tonight at 10. I can't promise anything, Caleb. Just get me the recording of yesterday's session, Martha Jean. Put it on a thumb drive. I'll meet you at the old gas station on the county line at 10:30 p.m. And thank you, you're saving Ironwood again. Caleb hung up, adrenaline surging through him. This was a far better use of the remaining $60,000 than a futile attempt to match the Millers. If he could prove the council acted illegally, the Millers' takeover attempt would collapse and the water rights would be secured permanently. He had traded his legacy for the lie, but now he was risking Martha Jean's career to expose the truth. He was becoming a man of desperate measures, but it was all for Eleanor. He spent the evening pretending to be busy with ranch work, but his mind was fixed on the town hall basement. He knew the risk was immense, but the alternative, watching Eleanor lose Ironwood, was unbearable. At 10:15 p.m., under the dark, dry sky, Caleb drove his pickup toward the county line, praying that Martha Jean hadn't changed her mind. He was about to confront the dark heart of Dry Creek's corruption. If he failed, Eleanor would lose everything, and Caleb would be left with nothing but his broken trust and the blood money from Maverick's sale. He had to succeed. He had to bring down the men who had betrayed her. End of Part 2. Caleb parked his truck at the deserted county line gas station, the air thick with the smell of old fuel and dry earth. He killed the engine and waited, the silence pressing in around him. He felt like a spy in his own country. At 10:35 p.m., Martha Jean's sedan pulled up, her headlights cutting through the darkness. She looked pale and nervous, clutching a small black thumb drive in her hand. Caleb met her between the cars. "Caleb, I shouldn't be here," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the empty highway. "Jenkins' office is secure, but I had to go through 3 layers of passwords just to access the archives. I only pulled the audio file for yesterday's executive session." She pressed the drive into his hand. It was warm from her grip. "Thank you, Martha Jean. This is going to save Ironwood, and maybe save you from working for that tyrant." Martha Jean shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "If he finds out, I lose everything. My pension, my job. I did this for Eleanor, Caleb. I saw what they did to her yesterday. They broke her spirit." "I won't let him ruin you," Caleb promised fiercely. "Once I use this, the recording goes straight to the county attorney. Jenkins will be too busy saving his own hide to worry about you." "Be careful, Cowboy," she warned, pulling back. "He's a cornered rat. They all are." Caleb watched her drive away, then climbed back into his truck. He didn't dare listen to the recording near the ranch. He drove 10 miles into the desolate scrubland, found a dark spot, and pulled out his old laptop, a relic he usually only used for cattle inventory sheets. He plugged in the thumb drive. The file was labeled Council Session 814 Water Allocation Review. He hit play. The audio was muffled at first, static mixing with the drone of the air conditioner. Then Mayor Jenkins' voice, clear and unctuous, filled the truck cab. "And that is why, gentlemen, we cannot approve Mrs. Vance's request. We are looking at long-term stability. The Ironwood Ranch, under its current aging management structure, simply presents too high a risk for the municipal water supply." Peterson's voice chimed in, sounding smug. "It's about succession, Harold. We need younger blood at the helm. If Eleanor were to, heaven forbid, become incapacitated, we'd have chaos. The Millers offer a streamlined corporate approach." And then came the truly damning exchange, confirming the blackmail. "So the plan stands," Jenkins confirmed. "We let the anonymous offer for the emergency lease go through. It's good money for the fund, and it shuts up the public outcry for a few months. But we immediately use the crisis allocation review power to pressure her. We give her 30 days to accept the Millers' offer for 51% ownership. The Millers get the ranch, the town gets the $500,000 bonus, and we replace the aging management with professionals. Everyone wins." Harold Finch, the lawyer, sounded slightly uneasy. "Are we sure this isn't crossing a line, Mayor? This looks like coercion." Jenkins laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "It's good business, Finch. Eleanor Vance is an emotional liability. The Millers are future assurance. The drought gave us the opportunity. We're just seizing it." Caleb's hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. It was all there: ageism, prejudice, corruption, and a clear plan to use the water rights, the very rights Caleb had bought with his grandfather's legacy, as a weapon against Eleanor. He copied the file onto his laptop and pulled the thumb drive. The evidence was secured. He drove back to Ironwood, the sun already hinting at dawn on the horizon. He hadn't saved the ranch yet. He had only secured the proof needed to fight. Eleanor woke early, the weight of the 30-day deadline already crushing her. She was determined to start calling lawyers, but the futility of fighting the entire town council felt overwhelming. She found Caleb waiting for her on the porch, holding a mug of coffee. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were burning with a fierce, quiet intensity she hadn't seen since the crisis began. "Good morning, Eleanor," he said, handing her the coffee. "Morning," she replied, taking the mug cautiously. "Did you make that call to your wealthy contact?" "I did," Caleb said, shaking his head. "But I found something better than money." He sat down beside her and told her about Martha Jean, the council recordings, and the conversation he had listened to in the dark. He didn't just summarize. He played the key snippets for her on his laptop. As Jenkins's voice, smug and dismissive, talked about the need to replace aging management, Eleanor listened, her face hardening into a mask of pure, righteous fury. She didn't flinch when Jenkins detailed the plan to use the water lease as leverage to force the sale to the Millers. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute, broken only by the steady, life-giving sound of the water pump running in the distance. Eleanor slowly closed the laptop, her hands shaking. "They didn't just reject me, Caleb. They calculated my ruin. They were never going to let Ironwood survive under my management." "Exactly," Caleb affirmed. "The Millers' $500,000 to the town isn't a benefit. It's a bribe to force a sale based on illegal prejudice. We have them, Eleanor. We have documented proof of age discrimination and coercion." "What do we do now?" she asked, the fight returning to her eyes stronger than ever. "We don't go to the county attorney yet," Caleb stated. "We go to the town hall. We confront Jenkins and Peterson with the recording, and we demand an immediate, unconditional resolution. We need the water rights secured permanently, and we need a public retraction of the Millers' offer. If they refuse, we threaten to release this audio to the local media and file charges of corruption and age discrimination." Eleanor stood up, pulling her hat low over her eyes. The tiredness was gone, replaced by the energy of a woman who had just been handed the sword to fight her oppressors. "Let's go, boy," she said, her voice sharp and steady. "It's time to settle up with Dry Creek." The town hall was quiet. Jenkins and Peterson were already in the mayor's office, likely discussing how to spend their future $500,000 bonus. Eleanor and Caleb walked past Martha Jean, who gave them a quick, terrified nod and strode directly into the mayor's office, shutting the door behind them. Jenkins looked up, annoyed. "Eleanor, I told you, you have 30 days. I don't appreciate interruptions." Peterson looked nervous, sensing the atmosphere. Eleanor didn't sit down. She placed the laptop on Jenkins' immaculate mahogany desk, opened it, and hit play. The recording started mid-sentence. "Replace the aging management with professionals. Everyone wins." Jenkins' face went from annoyance to confusion, then horror. He lunged for the laptop. "Turn that off! What is that?" he sputtered, his slick composure shattering. Caleb put a hand on the desk, stopping Jenkins. "That, Mayor, is the audio recording of yesterday's executive session, and it's the proof that you and Peterson are using illegal age discrimination and coercion to force Eleanor Vance to sell her ranch to the Millers." Peterson was sweating profusely, his hands trembling. "This is illegal surveillance. You can't—" "It's a standard council recording, Peterson, which you both forgot to delete," Eleanor cut in, her voice cold and commanding. "Listen carefully, gentlemen. This recording is now saved to multiple off-site locations. If anything happens to me, Caleb, or the Ironwood water supply, this audio goes straight to the State Attorney General's office, along with a full accounting of the Millers' contingent $500,000 bribe." Jenkins slumped into his chair, defeat washing over him. The $500,000 he had been counting on was now a weapon aimed squarely at his career. "What do you want, Eleanor?" he wheezed. "We want two things immediately," Eleanor stated, leaning forward, her hands flat on the desk. "First, the Millers' offer is to be publicly and permanently rejected by the council this afternoon. Second, the water rights lease to Ironwood Ranch purchased by the anonymous civic investor, is to be converted into a permanent, non-contingent water easement, secured for the life of the ranch, regardless of management structure," Caleb added, his voice low and dangerous. "And you will publicly issue a statement citing clerical error for the initial delay, and you will apologize to Eleanor for the miscommunication. No mention of age, no mention of viability, just a simple public retraction, Mayor." Jenkins looked at Peterson, who was already shaking his head frantically. They were trapped. Exposure meant ruin. "Done," Jenkins muttered, defeated. "I'll call an emergency session for 2 p.m. The easement will be approved and the miller's offer will be rejected." Eleanor didn't smile. She simply nodded. "We will be waiting for the signed paperwork, Mayor, and we will be keeping a copy of this recording just in case." Eleanor and Caleb walked out of the town hall, leaving the two men to face the wreckage of their corrupt scheme. The air outside felt clean, the sun felt less cruel. Ironwood was truly saved this time. Olil! They drove back to the ranch in a silence that was less tense, but still heavy. The external threat was gone, but the internal breach remained. As they pulled up to the main house, Eleanor turned to Caleb. "You saved us, Caleb. You found the leverage, and you fought them like a lion. I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You don't owe me anything, Eleanor," Caleb said softly, looking out at the happy, drinking cattle. "I owe you everything." He knew the time for the truth had come. The ranch was safe. The lie had to end. "There's one more thing I need to tell you, Eleanor, about Maverick." She braced herself, the memory of his betrayal still raw. "I know you sold him to clear your debts, Caleb. We will figure out how to rebuild your future. It will take time." Caleb shook his head, looking her straight in the eye. "There were no debts, Eleanor, not real ones. I lied to you." Eleanor stiffened. "What?" "I lied about the debt because I knew you wouldn't have let me do it otherwise," Caleb confessed, the words tumbling out, laced with pain and relief. "Maverick was worth $150,000. When I left that meeting yesterday and you told me they had rejected you because of your age, I knew they were waiting for Ironwood to fail so the Millers could swoop in." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I sold Maverick immediately to Sean O'Malley. I took $90,000 of that money, and I used Martha Jean as a go-between to present the anonymous offer to the council. That anonymous investor, Eleanor, that was me. That was Maverick's money." Eleanor stared at him, motionless. Her mind raced, putting the pieces together, the sudden sale, the perfect timing of the anonymous check, the astronomical price. You traded your entire future," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your grandfather's legacy, to buy the water rights for Ironwood. It was the only way," Caleb pleaded. "They wouldn't sell to Eleanor Vance, the aging woman they wanted to fail, but they couldn't refuse $90,000 cash from an anonymous source. I had to make the lie about the debt so you wouldn't reject the water. If you had known the price, you would have sent the money back, and Ironwood would have died." He reached out, his hand hovering near hers. "I had to let you hate me, Eleanor. I had to let you believe I was selfish, because your legacy is worth more than mine. This ranch is your life. Maverick was just a bull, a great bull, but still just an animal. Ironwood is everything." Eleanor didn't speak for a full minute. Her expression was a confusing mix of fury, astonishment, and deep, aching love. "You idiot," she finally said, and the tone was not one of anger, but of profound, overwhelming emotion. "You magnificent, stubborn, self-sacrificing fool." Tears finally spilled over, not tears of grief or defeat, but tears of realization. She saw the true measure of Caleb Hayes. Not the greedy, debt-ridden foreman, but the fiercely loyal son who had thrown away his most prized possession, his connection to his own past, to secure her future. "I was so angry," she choked out. "I thought you had betrayed me like the rest of them. I thought you had chosen money over loyalty." I chose loyalty over legacy, Caleb corrected her gently. She reached out, pulling his hand into both of hers, gripping it tightly. You didn't have to lie, Caleb. I would have found another way. No, you wouldn't have. You would have fought me to protect my inheritance, and you would have lost the ranch in the fight. I couldn't risk that, Eleanor. I couldn't watch them steal this from you because of their small-minded prejudice. She stood up and wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly for the first time in years. This hug was different. It was the embrace of a mother, a partner, and a survivor. They called me old, Eleanor murmured into his shoulder, but they failed to see that the old lioness has a very loyal, very young cowboy defending the pride. She pulled back, looking at him, her eyes shining. We lost Maverick, Caleb. We lost him, but we saved Ironwood, and we saved something else too. We saved our trust. And we proved that this ranch is going to survive, not because of the council or the millers, but because of grit and loyalty. Life returned swiftly to Ironwood Ranch. The pump ran tirelessly, the reservoir filled, and the cattle recovered. The emergency council session went exactly as planned. Jenkins, looking small and defeated, announced the rejection of the miller's offer and the permanent water easement for Ironwood, citing new, unforeseen information that made the initial review moot. The town of Dry Creek got its $90,000, and Eleanor Vance got her ranch back, secured forever. The gossip about Eleanor's sudden, mysterious benefactor raged for weeks, but the council kept its silence, terrified of the consequences of the leaked tape. Caleb and Eleanor worked side by side, the distance between them gone. The lie was gone, replaced by a bond forged in sacrifice and shared risk. The $60,000 left over from Maverick's sale was put into a new Ironwood account, earmarked for buying high-quality breeding stock when the drought finally broke. It was a new legacy, built from the ashes of the old. One evening, months later, when the first faint, hopeful clouds finally gathered on the horizon, Eleanor and Caleb were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant hills. I still miss him, you know, Eleanor said quietly, referring to Maverick. Me too, Caleb admitted, but O'Malley promised he'd send us pictures when the first calf arrives. We'll breed our own champion again. Eleanor smiled. We will. But Caleb, you taught me something important. I spent so long fighting the town's prejudice, focusing on my age, trying to prove I was still capable. I forgot that the greatest strength isn't in what you own or how long you've lived, but who you have standing beside you. She looked at him, her eyes soft. You sacrificed everything to save me from the consequences of their prejudice. You proved your loyalty, boy, and that is worth more than any champion bull. I'm just glad I could save Ironwood, Eleanor. You didn't just save Ironwood, she corrected him, patting his arm. You secured its future. And when the time comes, Caleb, and it will be years from now, Ironwood will be yours. Not because you waited for me to die, but because you sacrificed your own future to save its life. That's the only kind of succession plan this ranch needs. Caleb nodded, looking out over the land that was finally starting to show tentative signs of green beneath the dust. He had lost his inheritance, but he had gained something far more enduring, the unconditional trust of the woman he considered family, and the knowledge that he had fought the drought, the prejudice, and the greed of the town, and won. He was a cowboy, and he had made the ultimate sacrifice, not for money, but for love, loyalty, and the stubborn soul of a ranch called Ironwood. And in the heart of Texas, where water was gold and loyalty was everything, that was the greatest victory of all.